Okay. All right.
How's the foot? No surgery?
Not yet. They haven't looked at it yet.
Because I had questions on it, and I don't have a real there. So maybe I'll.
I don't know, how much you want to give me?
It'll be 15 here in a month.
There are issues.
It's crazy.
Yeah. How many do you have?
3.
Good evening and welcome to the January 15th City Council meeting. If you can please stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mayor Follendorf?
Here.
Vice Mayor Olivera?
Here.
Councilmember Herman?
Here.
Councilmember Matilde?
Here.
Councilmember Brolio?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Before we go into the approval of the agenda, I ask council to consider an amendment to the current agenda and move item 6A of the regular agenda to before public comment. Is there a motion to approve that?
So move.
Second.
Is there any public comment? No? Okay, there's a motion on the table. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0. Okay, so tonight we will move into our regular agenda item 6A, which is the City of Angels water and wastewater rate study and analysis. And we are going to move Matt to present first, and then we will go in the rest of the order. Is that okay?
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So the purpose of this item is to begin the public discussions on the water wastewater rate study and the financial analysis that was conducted by Bartle Wells. Also, we wanted to take this opportunity, as the council directed us some months ago, to work with our city engineer, Weber Guillaume and Associates, on sort of a state of the system and an analysis of the current CIP so that that information could guide the financial investments over a period of time. So Matt's firm, Weber Guillaume Associates, has an extensive history with the city and our water wastewater system. So Matt is prepared to give you that state of the system report. And I think if you remember, the question was asked, is our CIP and our master plan, is this pie in the sky or grounded in reality? So Matt is prepared to answer that information and help that guide our decisions as we move forward. We also have Mike Minkler here, who's going to give you an update on the UWPA and its relationship with the city and the importance of supporting that JPA and its financial sustainability as well. All of those are elements within the rate study. And then Bartle Wells, Michael DeGroot has presented for you options for your consideration. And at this point, we would like to get your direction, your input on those options. In Michael's presentation, he's highlighted to you the importance of public outreach and its success in ensuring successful rate increases. So we also hope to get your direction on public outreach moving forward. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and each of them have PowerPoint presentations for you. Matt.
Thank you, Melissa. Good evening, council.
We don't have any microphones over there.
No, I can give you mine.
Steal this one.
Yes.
Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay. I'll try to speak up. Okay, so thanks for that introduction. So basically tonight, I'm going to give you a little recap of the water and wastewater master plans that were done a while back. As Melissa mentioned, tonight I'm going to give you a little debriefing on the priority items and give you my recommendations. Most of these items that we're going to talk about, there's nothing new. These have all been discussed in the past, so they've kind of been lingering and kind of kick the can down the road type things. When Melissa and I first started talking about this, she threw out that comment, pie in the sky. And I've heard the term before, but I didn't really, put it in context with this, and I think it's really fitting. So I think tonight my objective is basically to explain to you that these master plans are not pie in the sky, and they have some validity, and they are things that really need to be done. Maybe not everything, but there is a good amount of work that needs to be addressed. Just a little breakdown of your guys' system. There's a lot of numbers here. Just to kind of put it in perspective, and a little background on the water and sewer system. You got a lot of infrastructure, and I think a lot of times it gets forgotten about how big this city system really is on the water and wastewater side. It's pretty substantial. The first plan we're going to talk about, or I'm going to talk about, is the Water Master Plan. This was done back in July of 2013 by NV5. They used to go by Nolte, pretty reputable firm in the valley. Just a little sidebar note, most master plans are usually done every 5 years, so you can see we're kind of over that point right now, so something to start thinking about in the future. Might want to update these. The first figure here we're going to talk about from the water, this is figure 9-1, and this map basically shows the locations of potential well sites that could develop an alternative water supply for the city. At this time, I don't really think this is a priority for the city. As long as the EWPA, get the water from them, I think focus on that. I think a better option to drilling a new well is the possibility of using and I might butcher this name, the Schmauder Mine. Back in 2001, the city was able to work with the property owner, and this was used to supply water to the city during the Darby fire. So I think this is a valid possibility for, water source if need be. And I would look into that before I'd spend money on drilling a new well. And in 2001, when they did that, the property owner had an 80 horsepower pump, and they were able to tap into that, pull water out of there, and they piped it up to the treatment plant, dumped it into the forebay, and treated the water, came out of the mine. So I thought that was really good. And Gary mentioned to me that, he was really receptive and really willing to work with the city on that. So I think that goes a long way, good connections like that. Moving on to the distribution system, the master plan talked about two different phases. There's phase 1A and phase 1B. Back up a little bit. The phase 1A is work that needs to be done to provide fire flow to the city, and the 1B work is to provide reliability hydraulically, so pressure and volume that's needed in the system. So we'll start with phase 1A, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to stop me anytime. So the phase 1A work, this is figure 9-2 out of the master plan. And this map basically shows the location of the distribution system projects that need to be done to mitigate inadequate fire flow. So you can see from this table, there's a few projects totaling about 7,000 lineal feet of pipe at a total of $13 of about $1.4 million. My recommendation on this item is, before I would go spend any money on fixing this stuff, I think it'd be best to reanalyze the water model, make sure that this work is actually necessary. Most likely it is, but I think it'd be good to go back and look at the water system model and verify that these are actually places that need to be upsized pipe-wise. Moving on to phase 1B. This is also figure 9-2. It was all combined into one figure. It was kind of congested, so we kind of tried to clean it up a little bit and break it out a little bit. And this map shows the locations of the distribution system projects that need to be done from a reliability standpoint, pressure and flow issues. Not as many projects, but as you can see, it's quite a bit of lineal footage, about 7,000 feet, close to the 1A work at an estimated cost of about $2 million. So I think these are big, important things to do. Definitely the 1A, I would go back and relook at the model before I spend any money on fixing that type of infrastructure. In addition to the 1A and 1B work that we just talked about on the distribution side, it was identified in the Water Master Plan that there are significant number of old dilapidated pipes, old PRVs, old hydrants, old meters that are going to start needed to be replaced. They're failing right now, and they're old and antiquated. They need to be replaced. So I think that's a important thing that needs to be planned for that wasn't even mentioned in the master plan, because it just, over time, it just keeps getting worse and worse. It's an old system. This picture, it's kind of hard to see. This is a 4-inch steel line that was pulled out of the highway over by Tanko Well Drilling last fall. And as you can see, there's a lot of buildup and rust and barnacles growing in there. It's pretty nasty, but 4-inch pipe, and what you can't see, that's probably, there's only about an inch and a half maybe left internal diameter of that pipe. So that's a significant loss of the pipe there. So you're modeling a 4-inch pipe, and it's really only 1-inch pipe. It's not good. So I'm sure there's plenty of that everywhere in this old system. Moving on to figure 9-3. This map showed the locations of potential storage tank locations. And what the Water Master Plan recommended was, and I don't have a pointer, but there's a, there we go. Over here, this is Tank C, or Zone C they called it, off Vallecito Road. That was the recommended tank location. To me, that doesn't make any sense because you have no water over there. They were thinking of drilling a well over here. So without a well, tank ain't going to do much good. So I think the recommended tank location is up here, Zone B, on the north end of town. They call it the Brunner Hill Tank. And I think this area is starting to experience some growth, and we already know there's a kind of an issue with the lack of fire flow in that area. So I think that would be a more beneficial area to have a new storage tank. And the Water Master Plan estimated this at $3.31 million. And that included a new tank, new supply and discharge lines, and a booster pump station. So I think that's better than the Zone C area. Moving on to the water treatment plant. There's currently a project under design by Blackwater Consulting Engineering, and that project is going to modify the filtration system, and it's also going to modify the backwash processing. There's also going to be some upgrades to the hypochlorite generation system, as well as the main transmission pipeline. Takes water from the treatment plant down to town, down Murphy's Grade Road. This project was estimated in the master plan at $3.3 million, and the current estimate from Blackwater is 5.4 to 6.9. So you can see that back when this report done, the costs have really significantly gone up. And that project is in the design phase. Okay, getting into some of the cost and numbers that were included in the report. This is table 11-3. It's a 20-year capital improvement plan. Basically, the way they did this was see if I can get this together. This is the Phase 1A work we talked about, Phase 1B, Phase 1C, and 2A, and Phase 2B. So these two areas over here I didn't talk about because it's more related to future growth and build out. The priorities were these 1A and 1B work, the fire flow and the line reliability. So I think those are more important. But they planned in 2013 to 2015 to do that work, and 2015 to 2018 to do the 1B work. And we're kind of well past that. So what I tried to highlight on this table was the first two items there. Those are the water treatment plant work. It's the project that the Blackwater is currently working on. The next kind of highlighted area here, sorry, I just got that in your eye. That is the well, which I talked about earlier. I don't think is a priority. That was a pretty substantial cost. And then lastly, down here at the bottom is the storage tank. They called the Zone C as a priority, but I think really Zone B, the Brunner Hill, is kind of the priority there. So if you're to look at this 20-year capital improvement plan, it calls for about $17 million worth of projects that should have been done by 2018, and that includes the 1A and 1B work. And to date, and we'll see on the next slide, only about $168,000 has been done. It's only one project on Depot Road. and that's highlighted here. So you can see these, the majority of the 1A, 1B work are, these are all the streets that are listed here. This top line here is work to the transmission main that comes out of the treatment plant down to Murphy's Grade Road. So that's part of the Blackwater project, that's why that's highlighted. And again, I don't think these are priority. This is more for future build-out and growth. So to kind of summarize and put this all together, I think the two main priorities are the water treatment plant project, estimated at 6.9, and the Brunner Hill storage tank, estimated at 3.5. So based on that, the city currently has about $10 million in projects, just from these two projects, and this isn't considering any money for any line replacement for the old steel lines and the old PRVs and old hydrants, upgrading that. So it's a pretty substantial amount of work just for two projects, not counting all the other stuff that needs to be done as well. So looking forward over the next 5-year rate study period, the city needs to collect about $2 million to fund these two projects. And the rates that we're looking at show collecting only $1 million a year. So you can see this is going to, or this indicates the city must go after some additional funds to come up with that shortfall. And to summarize on the water here, like I mentioned, most of these projects, there's nothing new. They've been identified in the past. They've kind of been lingering around. Most of all the projects the city has done recently were kind of due to leaks and line failures, and most of this work wasn't even included in the master plan. It's just unfortunate they're old and shot, so they had to get replaced. So spending money on things that you got to do, but you also have these other projects over here that need to be done as well. And the priority recommendations moving forward is definitely we need to complete that water treatment plant project that Blackwater's working on. If you don't, there's going to be potential fines due to the backwash water, so that's going to be big. Got to get that done. And also repairing the main transmission main. I know in the past it's had a lot of issues, so that's going to be a big ticket item to get that fixed. Secondly, I think you definitely need to reanalyze the fire flow, make sure that 1A work is really justifiable before you go spending the money on replacing that line. Thirdly is the Brunner Hill storage tank. And then lastly, I think is, we got to reanalyze and develop an updated CIP and schedule for the water, and get a better handle on that and figure out what needs to be done. Any questions on the water before we jump into wastewater? Nope. Okay, so on the wastewater master plan, it was also done by NV5. This was done in April of 2012. I wanted to share this little excerpt, I guess you'd call it, from the general plan, but most of you are probably already aware of this. I believe Amy talked to you guys about it last month or maybe in November at the council meeting, but I wanted to share this little note here. It says, "The city shall implement a process requiring no net increase in wastewater connections in conjunction with adoption of the 2020 general plan in the areas connecting to the system identified as at capacity in the 2020 general plan." So this is really important. There's basically a moratorium on the sewer until this area gets fixed. So I think you guys have kind of already gave some direction on moving forward, so that's good. I think Blackwater is working on a grant to get some funds for that, so that's good. So this work that I mentioned of, that's kind of calling it the bottleneck area, it's figure 10-1 for the master plan, and this figure basically shows the priority collection system projects which are required to remove the moratorium. And the majority of the lines are east of 49. This, turn this thing around. So here's the downtown Main Street, and then this is going down to the sewer plant out here. Greenhorn's like over here. The master plan proposed to only replace certain sections of this line. As you can see, there's kind of little gaps in here. They're only planning to fix a few of the lines. So my recommendation is, due to the age of this and condition, it's an old line, it doesn't make sense just to piecemeal it. You gotta go in and fix the whole thing. So my recommendation is to replace all the portions from the bottom down to the north end of town there. So the master plan estimated this at about 1.1, and realistically, you're looking at about $2 million to do everything in today's dollars. So that's a big ticket item.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
So implementing this, how many new wastewater connections would we get out of redoing this bottleneck here?
I don't know if you'd actually get more. This is just to fix the current.
It's just a fix. We're not going, so if it's a 6-inch line, we're going to go back with a 6-inch line? Or would we dump in a 12-inch line so we?
Yeah, I think you upgrade it this time.
Okay, so this number, this 2 million,
It's
doesn't
probably gonna be
actually
more.
give us any new connections, it just
It fixes
fixes.
what's the problem there now.
An upgrade.
Okay,
Yeah.
so no upgrade, it just fixes what we have.
It actually allows us to realize the capacity we have at our wastewater plant that we cannot currently realize. We cannot, we have enough connection ability in our wastewater treatment plant, we just can't get everything to it.
Okay.
So that's what it does.
There's an optimum size for the lines, right, to get the capacity in the plant?
Say that again?
In this replacement work,
Mhm.
there's an optimum size for
Oh,
the
yeah.
pipes
Yeah.
to get to the capacity in the plant, right? Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's, no, it doesn't have this line size here.
Melissa, do you know if Blackwater is pursuing this from a whole project perspective with this grant, or if they're pursuing the piecemeal?
So I understand they're pursuing the whole project,
They're pursuing the whole project.
but I will make sure that it also has not only the maintenance component that Matt's talking about, but the capacity increasing component that all of you are concerned about.
Yeah, it
So
doesn't
that
make
main
sense
line
to fix it now and then come back later and have to.
Right, we're
Yeah,
digging it up,
increasing
let's dig it up. Same thing with like the 1A, 1B. Were those studies done to just bring up failing lines, or was it to give us more capacity? So same thing on 1A, 1B,
Yeah.
just to fix, not,
Yeah,
okay, not expand.
yeah. Those get into those other tables that didn't talk about for the future build-out. But we're probably talking maybe like 10 to 12, 6 to 8, real minor.
Okay.
The big cost is gonna be putting it in, not really the material cost.
Right, no, I
So you
just-
might as well spend it a little bit more.
Okay.
So
Good
we
question.
will get those answering. We'll make that an action item.
Okay, moving on to the next figure. This is figure 10-2, and this is showing the required priority collection system project for lines that are at or exceed capacity of the peak flows. So the winter, you get I&I, peak wet weather flows. And my recommendation on this is I would do nothing right now. This is more of a when the city grows type thing to deal with. It's working fine now. But do know that once you get more growth, it's going to need to be addressed. And this is a line down at the south end of Greenhorn, coming down to the plant. This is the south end of Greenhorn down here.
So Matt, for the Council of Government, I'm sorry, not the council, but for the city council, one of their priorities is economic development. And one of their plans includes kind of a commercial growth and the Foundry Lane connection from 4 all the way to 49 and sort of build out of that area. So in order to realize that goal, would these be improvements that need to be implemented and completed in order for that kind of growth to come to that area?
Possibly, because I believe all that, and I'd have to look at the system maps, but I believe all that area comes down through Greenhorn and comes right down this pipeline.
Okay.
So it's a good possibility.
Okay. All right.
So the way the collection system's set up, there's kind of two different areas that all come to one point. So I believe, without having the map, I think that does come that
I
way.
think it might split at the lift station.
Yeah.
Everything north of the lift station goes on the project you just described.
Oh, okay.
And then downstream goes that
Goes that way.
direction. Yeah.
So then the Foundry Lane area wouldn't.
The majority of it goes up to the north, but there is a small bit that goes to the south.
Okay.
Is that-
So I was just wondering what future demand could be with those plans that we've got.
So currently, if you're going to do, I'm Kevin Silva, I'm the engineering technician for the city. all the stuff for Foundry Lane, it all goes to a pump station that all pumps down what I believe is Phase 1A. The upsizing through Booster, I believe, and all that. So everything from Foundry, if you're going to develop up there, will go through that section that needs to be updated. This Phase 2, this is all Angel Oaks and Greenhorn Creek, and that's pretty much it.
Okay.
So this section wouldn't have to be really included for the Foundry Lane.
Sorry, but I was just trying to understand where that
Oh, good
development
question.
area fed into.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Thanks,
thank you.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next figure, this is figure 10-3, and this is also, this is more of a build-out thing. So at this time, I don't think it's important to really do anything here, but I just wanted to point out that this, down the road, it's going to be a problem. So this is also the peak wet weather flows due to build-out. And there's 4 little areas here. North of the treatment plant, there's a line out on Main Street, and then there's a line on Angels Oaks Drive, and then a line in Greenhorn. Or I shouldn't say a line, but a segment. All righty. So in addition to those priority projects I just discussed that were in the short-term capital improvement plan, the capital improvement plan included funding $50,000 and $605,000 in alternating years for rehab of portions of the existing system based on the SSMP TV work. So one year you'd spend $50,000 to do the TV work, the next year you'd do the actual work, find out what the problems and start addressing them. And for those of you who don't know, the TV work is basically they put a camera down in the existing collection system, and it's pretty neat. They can see really detailed of everything, and they give you these nice little reports. And Kevin provided me, these are just a few, and as you can see, we tabbed, these are all areas with problems, severe problems, and this is just a tiny little portion of the system. So just in reviewing these reports, the city's definitely going to need some funds to start fixing some of these, like you mentioned earlier, the old antiquated, dilapidated collection system. I believe you guys already have it in a budget to do annual TV work, is that correct?
I believe we do, yes.
Okay.
And we do those inspections regularly.
So I would definitely
We'll get the funds to-
continue doing that. I wanted to, these were just a few of the examples I wanted to show you guys. So this first one up here on Murphy's Grave Road, it's really hard to see, but the water level is about, the inspector indicated it was about 3/8 full. And you can see a lot of grease buildup. And so you're starting to get capacity, this old line. This lower one right here, this is on Main Street, and they noted it had a severe crack. Severe cracks are bad. You're going to get I&I, inflow and infiltration, which is just water you don't need to, it's going to end up at the plant, and you're paying to treat groundwater. So anytime you can eliminate I&I is great. This line up here, you can see it's got a little gusher, got some I&I, that's not good. They're calling it severe infiltration, so depending on how many gallons a minute that is, that's just extra flow that you got to treat, added to your treatment plant cost. This line here, Main Street and Raspberry, it's got a broken pipe, and this bottom one down here, this is really bad. Unable to continue with the camera. So if the camera can't get through, other things can't get through, and they're going to get plugged up, and you're going to have issues and spills. So these were just a few out of here that we noted here. So definitely think that's important, that you continue TVing and start implementing a plan to start fixing some of these areas. I know down on Main Street that the old line is really bad shape, so you guys probably have heard it before too.
What are the size of the current lines right now?
What's that?
The size of the current line?
I don't know.
Okay. I just curious.
It's pretty big.
Okay.
The main going down to the plant? Yeah. Kevin, do you know?
Which one?
The main that goes down to the plant?
Like at the plant or down Main Street?
Down Main Street?
Main Street.
Down Main Street, I think it's an 8. 8 or 10.
Okay, let's move on to some numbers here. So this is table 12-1. It was titled Short-Term CIP Plan. These top, turn this thing around. These top three items are the only thing that have been done. Those were some spray field improvements, phase 1 through 3. These items right here are the phase 1 work we talked about. That's the bottleneck area that Blackwater is going to be trying to go after some funds. This last item down here on the bottom, this is for a grit chamber at the headworks. This is one of the priorities that their chief plant operator, Aaron, has identified that needs to be done. So that's why that's highlighted. And the next slide is just a continuation of that same table. And this last item here that's highlighted is the influent flow meter and vault that Aaron also identified as needed to be done. So looking at this, the city should have completed about $4.2 million worth of projects by 2018. And the only projects that have been done were the phase 1 through 3 at the spray field for a total of $848,000. So a lot of work there, but I definitely think that the priority is the phase 1 work. There's some other stuff in there that it doesn't need to be done right away. So to summarize those projects, the phase 1 project estimated about $2 million. Might be a little more to do the upsize in the pipe, like Alvin mentioned. This second project is a project that's currently underway right now by the contractor SSCI. This is the treated effluent line that takes the treated effluent to Greenhorn. The city's share of that, I believe, is about $110,000. The next item is the rehab over 5 years, spending the $50,000 to do the TV work 1 year, and then the next year, $605 to do the rehab work.
I don't see that.
It was changed.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. I added some stuff for you guys. And then the last two items were the items at the treatment plant that Aaron identified. So if the city were to complete these projects, the total cost of the collection system and the wastewater treatment plant priority is estimated at about $3.6 million over the 5-year rate study period. So looking forward, over the next 5 years, the study included collecting $3.25 million. So as you can see, you're going to have a shortfall of about $380,000. So doing a lot better on the wastewater side than the water. So I guess there's one plus there. To summarize, or a little summary on this. So same with the water. Most of these projects were identified quite a while ago. This is, I know, a little aggressive based on the timeframes and the funding, but these are things that need to be done. My priority recommendations are the phase 1, the line replacements to remove the moratorium, completion of the Greenhorn Creek wastewater return line, which is currently in construction, and then continue doing the TV work and start doing some line replacements. At the treatment plant, I think looking pretty good, just those two kind of minor things that Aaron recommended. And lastly, I think, just like the water, we need to develop a CIP and a schedule and kind of get a better handle on things. And I think the TV work will definitely help with that, kind of prioritizing what areas and what thing needs to be done. Some closing thoughts. I found this little, or I should say Tyler found this, my great slide button pusher over here. This is a note out of the general plan. It's the City of Angels vision statement. It says, to provide public services and facilities that are compatible with the needs and philosophy of the community. So I thought that was really good. So all of this is kind of I was trying to think of an analogy. It's kind of a double-edged sword, I would say. You got, the city needs to grow to survive, but the city can't really grow unless you start fixing some of this infrastructure. That's kind of on the flip side. So it's kind of a tough juggling act there. And I think that's it. So if any questions? I know that was probably a lot, and I kind of rushed through it, so.
So just to be aware of time, Matt has a commitment at 7 in Murphy's.
San Andreas.
Oh, I'm sorry, San Andreas.
Yeah.
So I think maybe just a few minutes if there's any questions for Matt.
You had said that you had put the priority on the Greenhorn Creek line down there, but in order to grow up in the proposed connection area where their Tractor Supply, et cetera, all that in that area. That water goes,
Are you talking water or wastewater now?
that was water, correct?
I think it was wastewater.
Or was it wastewater?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that I misunderstood. I believed that more of that development could go through the Greenhorn Creek line, but staff clarified that only a small portion of it does,
Right.
which
So-
supports the direction that Matt was going, which is that should be less of a priority on that Greenhorn Creek.
Right, that's what I'm thinking also. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking there was more of that development in the corridor, so I just wanted to verify that. So Matt was correct, and Amy and Kevin verified that actually no more of that development is going to go across the highway and down Booster Way,
Got it.
which is
Okay.
why he has supported that as his number one priority recommendation for
I
improvement.
think that was slide 21.
So sorry if I created that confusion. I apologize.
That's okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. Any other questions?
So
Yes.
is there room for growth out of the Greenhorn side, water and sewer? Can we divert some of that, maybe put a lift station in and go through the Greenhorn side and down?
Possibly.
And
I think
and
we looked at that a
abandon some
long
of that
time ago.
old? Okay, so it had been kind of checked out.
Yeah, I think there's kind of a high point there, so there would have to be
Right,
plenty
you have to
over.
put a lift station to get up and over
Yeah.
Angels Oaks and then down and in, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
But I don't know how much
I wanna
capacity
say
is left
that-
in
That
Greenhorn.
when they did Greenhorn, it was, they put pretty small, like 6-inch pipe, so it might be some areas where,
It's not gonna do a whole heck of a
Yeah.
lot anyway. Okay.
I got a question for Matt.
yes,
So, all these problematic areas are in what age range? Are they 75 years old, 50 years old? What do you think?
probably, yeah.
And
50, I'd say 50 plus.
And materials today, when this is replaced, is it about the same lifespan, or is it known?
No, I think on the sewer side, definitely the old clay, it's had its life. And now everybody's putting in SDR, the plastic for sewer, so it's gonna have a lot longer lifespan. The old steel water lines, now they're going to plastic, it's a lot better material, and it's gonna last a heck of a lot longer.
Okay, thanks.
Is that?
I don't know what causes it.
Thank you.
All right.
You're welcome.
You have public questions?
Do we have time for public? Or
Sure.
limit their questions? Is there any public question? Okay, Jack.
My name is Jack Lynch, 600 Selkirk Ranch Road. I read the details of this proposal very, very carefully. As you may know, I was on the council for 8 years, and these reports that we're looking at tonight were presented to the council in the past. At that time, one of the advantages the council had is there were 2 members of the council who were on a water and wastewater facilities committee. They knew intimately, because they're meeting every month, every 2 months, with staff and the engineer as to what was going on in that particular area. Actually, when I look at this kind of a report coming to this council, it's really overwhelming. You're being told that this information was presented 2012, 2013, and nothing was done. There was lots of discussion back in 2012 and 2013 when those reports were received. So I would urge the council to get a hold of what those discussions were. For example, there's no reference at all, not critical of it, but there's no reference at all to the $800,000 to $900,000 that was spent on sewer replacement, particularly in the Altaville area. So with that money spent, the idea was to open up capacity in the very line that we see recommended here needs to be replaced, because it was all I&I. In the winter months, when you had the I&I, then you had the capacity problem in that line. So I think there's a lot of things that need to really be scrutinized. before you accept everything at face value, because there is a lot of history. In the interest of time, I have a lot of individual questions, but I'm really troubled by the fact that all of a sudden you're overwhelmed with all this stuff without a proper perspective of history and why the past councils did or did not do certain things. They did a lot of things, particularly wastewater plant, water treatment plant, a lot of expenditures, and particularly in the sewer lines. I just love that one where we see continual program of replacing sewer lines. That's really needed in our city. Thank you.
I got a question, Jack, with respect to your knowledge of that era. With respect to the 800,000 that you say was spent,
Yes. All in Altaville, all the sewer lines in the trailer court area and all of those streets, the sewer lines were all cracked and I was enormous. And there was, in the older section of the city, there was replacement of lines, and it's all documented. So that's what I'd like the council to be aware of. A lot of money has 800,000 or 900,000, and I love the fact that you're planning to spend 600,000 every other year. It's needed, particularly along Main Street.
are you suggesting that 800,000 wasn't spent or wasn't done?
It was
Or are you-
spent.
So what's being proposed
Oh,
in
yeah.
this report you see as different? And it's not the same body of work?
No.
Okay.
But I think it's important for the council to appreciate that in past reports, you'll see that these things were recognized and monies were expended on replacing sewer lines, because if some of you may remember, in 2005, 2006, a very rainy year, City of Angels Camp in the newspaper requested people to cut back on taking showers, use of water in their homes in the middle of winter, because it was a rainy year. I was just overwhelming the sewer plant, the wastewater plant. They had to pump raw sewage up into the pond, up to the top of the hill, and go. It was a real tragedy. So at that point in time, the council said, we've got to do stuff about I. I just pass these things on because it's very important for the council members to get clued in, and staff too, as to what was the reaction with those old reports that came from NV5.
Okay,
Some
thanks.
things were done, some things were said, no, we don't think that's important. Thanks.
In the essence of time, any public comment may be direct?
So we're still continuing with this item, so I think at this point, Matt has a conflicting meeting.
Yeah.
We saw multiple presentations and I think public comment at the end. So I think in the interest of time, thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
The
Thank you.
information. And if it's okay, I'd like to turn it over to Michael Winkler, and he's going to tell us a little bit about UWPA and their financial needs. And all of this information is just a primer to the rate study and the information that we've provided for you there. I think between what Matt and Mike will have to present, we have justifications for need here.
Is it okay if I just do it from here?
Yes, please. And we're at a loss for our remote control. So it was here when we did our last training and now it's gone. So I have a feeling it's in somebody's pocket, maybe went through the laundry.
I didn't bring it
So
in.
Michael did not bring a presentation, he just has one for you here. So sorry about that, no pressure.
I didn't bring an assistant for the buttons, and this way I can duck if you guys don't like something I say. So yeah, thank you, Michael Minkler, General Manager at Utica Water and Power. And just to recognize a couple folks that are here, Larry Thompson's one of our, the founding board members at UWPA. So thank you for being here, Larry. Kyle Rasmussen is our water conveyance supervisor.
He's also here, I think he's here because he's concerned about rates, not necessarily to support me, but because he lives in the city, but we can call on him, I think, if we need some expertise. And Jack was on the UWPA board when I was first hired back in 2013 as general counsel for UWPA. So we've got some experience in the room. I'm going to do. Melissa and I talked about an overview and some background on UWPA, and then getting into sort of our budget situation and some budget projections. In the interest of time, I'm going to do a very quick, broad overview of UWPA, assuming that most people here are familiar with who we are, and some of you very familiar with who we are. There we go. And I'm sorry, I don't have copies for you, so you won't be able to read a lot of this, but I'll just run through it. UWPA is a joint powers authority. Joint powers authority is a public agency made up of other public agencies. Our two member agencies are the Union Public Utilities District in Murphys and the City of Angels Camp. Originally, that was formed with a third member, which is Calaveras County Water District, but they withdrew from the JPA back in 2004. We own and operate 27 miles of water conveyance, surface water conveyance, open canal and wood flume. We have 5 small reservoirs and 2 hydropower houses along the way. We are responsible for water deliveries to the Union Public Utility District and to the City of Angels Camp, as well as to about 14 irrigation contractors that we deliver directly to along the way. It's a small agency, a small staff, but extremely dedicated staff, very good at maintaining the water system and keeping the powerhouses going. And starting in '96, when UWPA was first formed and purchased the system from PG&E, up until about 2013, the water deliveries to UPUD and the City of Angels Camp were made at little or no expense to the member agencies. The hydropower revenue covered the cost of operating the system, and in addition to covering the cost of operating the system, the agency was able to pay back the loans that were taken out in order to purchase the system. So we paid back the debt on the system, and were able to make all those water deliveries with low or no cost to the member agencies. Starting around 2012, we had sort of a perfect storm of financial calamity. And it actually started going back 2007, 2008, when power prices started declining. We got lucky for a few years there because the market for renewable energy credits, I'm going to use the acronym RECs, but those are renewable energy credits. We get one of those for each megawatt that we produced. And the state created a market for RECs that we were able to take advantage of at the same time. So the decline in the power market was offset by the increasing market for RECs for a while. Starting in about 2011, both the power market and the REC market dropped, and at the same time we got hit with a 4-year historic drought in California, which meant we had less water to generate with, and we were getting less money for each megawatt that we were generating. Real quick slide just shows the downward trend in power prices over that time, starting to, let's see, that's just 2013 to 2016. I need to update that slide, but downward trend in power prices, in large part due to the downward trend in natural gas prices. That's the largest factor in pushing power prices down, but you also have a whole lot of solar and wind coming online at the same time in California, which is what pushed the price down for the RECs. So the combination of those things meant pretty significant budget deficits at UWPA, which meant we, for the first time, had to start asking the member agencies for contributions in order to cover our annual budgets. Again, this is just a graph showing what I just described to you. So that's the, let's see, this would be the power price. Going back to 2005, 2006, really started dropping pretty consistently. And then at the same time, though, we had the REC price propping us up for a short period of time before it then started to drop. And then you can see the combined price of both, you know, kind of maintaining along a certain level until when they both started dropping, we had major revenue problems. So bringing us up to the present, or relatively recent history, I guess. This is UWPA's recent expenditures. So for the last 5 years, that shows the change in expenditures, and you'll notice it's not going down. And a big part of the reason is because for a long time during the years in between, you know, catching up to the revenue, there was a lot of deferred maintenance, and we're still playing catch up on some of that. And we're also just seeing a consistent increase in regulatory compliance that just gets more costly every year. Our dam safety fees have gone through the roof, especially since Oroville happened, and that's just one example. You know, our FERC fees go up every year. Every year it gets more and more expensive to do the same thing that we've been doing forever. Really, though, I think focusing on these last two numbers right here, these are, you know, the budgeted numbers and then the actual expenditures for each of those years. You'll see last year we came in quite a bit lower, below what we had budgeted, for two reasons. One is, well, I'll simplify it, mainly because we didn't do as much work as we thought we were going to do for various reasons. A lot of that carried over into this current fiscal year, and a lot of that work is getting done right now. We just got back online after a three-month outage where we were able to complete a lot of that work. So really, I think for long-term budget planning purposes, I mean, I think for the next couple of slides, I did an average between these two numbers here, but these are really the relevant numbers. We're not going back to the 1.3, 1.4 days, unfortunately. And then recent revenues. So that was the expenditure slide. Basically, you know, to simplify, we're up around $2 million a year. On the revenue side, in the best case scenario, in past years, let's see, that's just power revenue here. This is total revenue here. So the best case scenario in the last couple of years, we were only running a $400,000 deficit. That's the, I'm going to try to lay it out here for you pretty candidly. It's not good. We are running very significant budget deficits every year still. And one of the biggest factors here in how big the deficit is, and since 2012, it's been a question of how big is the deficit, not whether we have one or not. And obviously, one of the biggest drivers of that is which water year we're in. We live by a table, an agreement, and a contract that we have with Northern California Power Agency that delineates 6 different water years, depending on the snowpack. And so from year to year, we don't know how much water we're going to have to generate with. So on May 1st every year is the snowpack projection that we go off of. We usually find out sometime at the end of the first week of May what our water year is, and that's fixed for the next 12 months after that. So if we have normal precipitation, like we've been very fortunate to have since 2016, we'll be in our best years, a water year 1. But 2015, we had our worst water year 6 for the first time ever. And it's about half the difference between water year 1 and water year 6 is roughly 50%. And feel free to stop me with questions anytime, you guys. I know this is, I'm going quickly with a whole lot of stuff here. There is a ton of information on this slide that none of you can see. But it again is just another slide that illustrates what I've been saying, that revenue has consistently gone down, expenses are consistently going up, and this very bottom line down here is 0 for a long time, and then it spikes and it's staying somewhat elevated. That's the contributions from the member agencies, which is really the bottom line for you guys here. And it peaked, I think, in 2016, where we needed on the order of $270,000 from each member agency just to make our budget for that year. Let's see if there's anything else on here that I need to address. Okay, so there's a lot on this slide as well, but this is really the bottom line. So this is broken up into the 6 different water years. The top row is our projected annual revenue with the current contracts that we have at the 2 different powerhouses. So let me break that down just a little bit real quick. In August of 2017, we were able to get a new contract for the Angels Powerhouse that nearly tripled our revenue from that powerhouse. Angels Powerhouse is about 1/3 of the size of the Murphy's Powerhouse, and they make about the same amount of money right now because of the new contract that we have down at in Angels Camp. We have been trying somewhat desperately for 2+ years now to try to get that same contract at the Murphy's Powerhouse, and that effort is still underway. And the best case scenario right now is that we would be able to secure that contract in Murphy's by maybe mid to late summer 2019. That's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario is we don't ever get it. And there's still a lot of uncertainty there, and we can't predict and we can't count on it at this point for planning purposes, until there's a lot of factors that are outside of our control, litigation between parties that we're not a part of, rulemaking that's playing out at the Public Utilities Commission, things that we can't control are really what's held up that process. So we'll continue to follow it and monitor it and push for it as quickly as we can, but we can't make any guarantees as to when or if that's going to happen.
I have a question, yeah. The Angels Powerhouse, that one, what has that been bringing in? That increase?
The revenue, off the top of my head, if I recall correctly, I think our revenue in Angels went somewhere in a water year 1, and I'm not going to get the numbers right, but somewhere on the order of $300,000 to $400,000 a year in power revenue to $800,000 a year. No, that doesn't sound right, but it's on that order of magnitude. It's like a 2.5 times the rate, depending on what the power market does. I'm comparing that to the power market, but for budgeting purposes, for the last several years, we've used a projection of about $24 to $25 a megawatt hour for each megawatt that we generate, plus another $9 for the RECs. So about $34, $35, and the REMAC contract is a fixed price of $89 per megawatt. So it's a game changer.
Yeah, but we're still running in a deficit though. We still expenditures, or is that still true though? Because we're still having to come up.
Yeah, because Angels is the much smaller of our 2 powerhouses. With both of those powerhouses in that type of contract, we would actually, for the first time in a while, that's what this slide shows here, is we would actually, in a water year 1, have budget surpluses. Because at Murphy's, it makes up the lion's share of our generation, 2/3 of our generations at Murphy's.
Is it too big for the remat? Is that the idea, that's too?
It was initially too big for remat. We were able to get some legislation through to change the rules of eligibility for the Murphy's Powerhouse. And while we were finishing up the implementation of that legislation at the PUC, some litigation came down to put the whole program on hold. So we're still waiting for that to play out so that we can finally get the contract that we need at Murphy's. But again, like I said, it's all of that is really out of our hands. So.
Thank you.
But that's what I show those two different variables here. This first row, like I said, is our annual revenue with the current contracts that we have right now. So that's Angels Powerhouse in a remat contract, and the Murphy's Powerhouse still in our old power purchase agreement. That is the revenue projections based on the megawatt hours that we would generate at each of those powerhouses for each of the water years. So the high in water year 1 is 1.48, let's see, so 1.5 million roughly in a water year 1, just power revenue. No, that's combined total revenue is about just under 1.5 million. In a water year 6, it's 710,000. So the water year is a huge variable in our annual revenue. I put in here just for informational purposes, but not for planning purposes. Like I said, projected revenue, if we did have both of the powerhouses in the remat contract, water year 1 revenue goes from 1.48 million to 2.41 million. And in the water year 6, that's 1085, so almost 1.1 million in a water year 6. So even with both of the powerhouses in better contracts, still running significant budget deficits. And this is the average of the last 2 fiscal years budget expenditures. And then this is the difference in each water year in revenue from, this is with the current contracts, and the bottom line is with both powerhouses in the remat contracts. So with this line right here, unfortunately, the whole line is red every water year. That's that's the situation that we're in right now, and for the foreseeable future. So for planning purposes, this is really the bottom line. UWPA budget projection deficits per water year. And the best case scenario is $550,000 budget deficit. Worst case scenario is, what is that, 1.32. So what ends up happening in those years, right now, we're able to, in the last several years, we've been able to offset some of that from Utica reserves, and then we have to rely on the member agencies to make up the rest of it. And so for planning purposes, that's why I say that's the most relevant number right there. We need to assume that that's going to continue to be the situation. And again, we're going to do everything in our power to increase revenue and keep expenses as low as we can. But we've got more and more sections of flume every year that are deteriorating at a faster rate than they did in the past. We're replacing more sections every year now than we've ever done before under Kyle's leadership, but we can't keep up anymore because of how the rate of deterioration is accelerating. The powerhouses are getting older, everything's getting older, and the regulatory burdens are increasing. So it's a challenge, but we do try to keep expenses obviously as low as we can. Multiple questions, yes.
What's your projected reserve balance for 17, 18?
Good question. I pulled that slide out, but off the top of my head, for the end of this fiscal year, I want to say we'll be around 500,000.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
A lot of focus is on the water use, but what about, as you mentioned, the deferred maintenance and other emergency capital improvement that UPA will be needing to do, and other planning as the water situation changes every year, that the member entities are going to be on the hook for, because it's not only the water use, but if part of that flume collapse, the reserves aren't going to be enough, and we're going to be back asking members for contributions to ensure those things get fixed.
Yeah, I'm really glad you raised that, because that reminds me of a couple of caveats to this table that I should mention. And one is, this is based on the last couple of years of expenditures where we have done a lot of catch-up work on some of the deferred maintenance, and we've had some of our big expenditure items. Our 5-year Part 12 inspection with FERC was last year. So some of our bigger ticket items happened over the last few years, and a lot of catch-up work that we're trying to do each year now. So that's why I say this year's fiscal, this fiscal year's budget projection and last fiscal year's are really the two that we should think about as relevant going forward. But what it doesn't take into account is obviously just inflation. It's going to get more expensive every year. And those projections are not based on an actual master plan and a capital improvement plan that really digs into what exactly are the projects that we're going to have to do, and in which year are we going to do them, and how are we going to plan financially for each of those projects. That's not what these numbers are based on. And that's really, we've tried to do some of that financial planning, and I'm hoping to do a little bit more this month. But at some point, we should take a deeper dive and have a master plan at UWPA where we've really looked at it at that level, and budget projections are based on that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right.
Okay.
All right.
So we're waiting for public comment until after all the presentations are done. So we will go into the next presentation.
Michael has a presentation on the water, wastewater options. Unless, Mike, were you planning on leaving?
No.
Did you need to leave? Okay.
No, I can stick around. I mean, I might leave after this item if that's
Okay,
okay.
yes, yes, absolutely. I just wanted to make sure that I was also considerate of your time as well. Thank you. Mike is the messenger here, and I think he's done a great job. Michael's done a great job of putting forth some options for council discussion and consideration. And then I think we have some recommendations for moving forward with a tentative schedule and also public outreach. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Hello, my name is Michael D. Groot. I'm with Bartle Wells Associates. And last time I was here was October. We went over some preliminary financial projections. So today I'd like to discuss the objectives of our presentation, give you a little bit of background again on the water and wastewater rates, talk about revenue requirements, proposed rates, look at bill impacts, a regional rate survey, and talk about next steps. So our objectives today are to recap the key issues regarding the rates and finances, present to you draft rates, and then receive your feedback and policy direction. So I'm going to start here with the water rate study. Here's some background again on the current water rates. So the last rate increase was August 2009, so it's been about a decade since you've increased rates, and you've had inflation kind of eating away at your revenues. The water master plan in 2013 identified about 24 million of capital improvement projects. And since your last rate increase, there has been a California court case, which is the Prop 218 San Juan Capistrano decision, and that clarified that water tiers have to have a cost justification. So looking here at your current rates, they're comprised of two main components. You've got a monthly meter charge, and you've got volumetric rates. So the monthly meter charge is a fixed charge per meter size, and you've got a lower charge currently for the in-city customers and a higher charge for outside city customers. And in addition to that, there's a $1 per account UWPA charge to cover your UWPA contributions. There's also a fixed charge per additional residential unit for apartments and mobile homes of $27.91. For your volumetric rates, this is where you get charged on the usage. The first 10 units of water in 100 cubic foot have no charge, so it's free. And 100 cubic foot is about 748 gallons. Tier 2 is your 11th unit to the 15th, and that's about $1.08 per unit. And then anything above that is $1.63 about. There's also an ag rate, which is $1.50 per unit. So here's a summary of our proposed changes based on the legal landscape in California. We're proposing to charge a uniform rate for all usage. You get all your water from a single source of supply, so looking at your costs, this is the most justifiable rate that we can recommend. The second point is we're proposing to eliminate the outside city rate differential. You need a cost basis for charging that additional rate, and staff could not provide us with the additional costs. And additionally, there's only about 4 outside city meters, and total revenue, additional revenue from that outside city charge is only about $2,800 a year. So we're proposing to eliminate that differential. Additionally, we're proposing to eliminate the charge per additional residential unit, because these customers are already charged for their meter, and that charging for the additional unit is essentially double charging these customers. So the impact on that would be about a reduction in revenue of $79,000 per year based on the 236 additional units that are currently charged. Our proposed rate structure is designed to make the water enterprise whole with that loss of revenue and recover those revenues on the meter and volumetric charges. Our fourth proposed change is to charge the unbilled city accounts for water. So when we were looking into the billing data, we discovered there are about 25 city-owned meters that are currently not charged for water, and we estimate based on our proposed 18-19 rates that would cost about $60,000 per year, and those meters use about 20,000 100 cubic foot per year. Our fifth proposal is to align the meter charges with AWWA standard ratios, and what those ratios are is a ratio of maximum capacity that you can get out of the meter, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then recover projected Utica power costs with a modified UWPA charge based on meter size instead of the current flat charge per account. So moving on to the revenue requirements for the water rates. So currently, the water enterprise collects about $1.5 million a year, and we're proposing 8% per year revenue increases for the next 5 years. So the revenue will increase to about $2.2 million a year. And this is designed to fund $1 million of capital per year identified in the master plan, plus a set aside for equipment and vehicle replacements. And the proposed UWPA charge would recover UWPA expenses. So here is our proposed UWPA fee. So we're using a projected cost of $125,000 a year in Utica water and power contributions, and we've divided that by your total system meter equivalents of 2,678, and that gives you a charge per meter equivalent of $3.89 for the smallest 5/8-inch meter, and that would increase based on the size of the meter all the way up to the 6-inch, which has 50 times the capacity of the 1-inch, and they would pay $194.52. And then we have calculated that fee for each year of the next 5 years. So we're recommending moving towards a meter size-based approach rather than a flat rate per account, because the meter approach is more proportionally allocating the cost based on the capacity that each meter has in the system. Whereas if we were to propose a meter charge, that would better recover something related to billing or a per account cost. So we're recommending this new approach to more proportionally allocate the costs. So in addition to the UWPA fee, and you heard from Michael how volatile the revenues are and the contributions will be moving forward, we're recommending a pass-through for wholesale water costs. And this is covered under Government Code 53756. And essentially, to implement the pass-through, the noticed rates must include an explanation of the pass-through, and customers must be provided 30-day notice of the pass-through in advance. And it does not require a Prop 218 hearing like the initial 5-year rate notice. And this pass-through will provide the ability to respond to unexpectedly high Utica water and power wholesale costs. And so the additional cost above our projected expenses are recommended to be passed through to ratepayers as $1 per meter equivalent. So moving on here to option 1 of the proposed rates. Option 1 aligns the meters with the AWWA ratios and collects about 70% from the meter charges and 30% from volumetric, which is consistent with the current rates. And you can see that the 5/8 meter goes down a little bit in our first year, even with the increase, because we're realigning the rates. So a lot of the larger meters are going to see much larger increases. So looking at the 6-inch meter, which is your largest meter, that would go from $503.11 to $1,817.28. So our proposed rate would go to a uniform charge per unit of $1.15. And over the 5-year period, that would go to $1.56. Our second option is to lower the fixed charge to collect about 50% of your revenues from the meter charge and 50% from volumetric. So you can see that 5-inch, 8-inch meter would go down even further to $27.09. And this will help offset the increase to the larger meters. But the use charge will go up higher than the previous option. Instead of $1.15, it's $1.91 in the first year, and that would go up to $2.60 per unit. So here is some bill impacts of our two options, and we've calculated the bills for varying levels of usage. So we've got a minimum level usage using 0 per month, low use of 7 units per month, average is about 14 units per month, moderate of 21 units, and excessive of 50 units. So under your current rates in option 1, it would go from $45.08 to $52.45 in the first year. And under option 2, it would go from $45.08 to $53.89. And I'll show you graphically option 1 here. So your average is going to go from $45.08 to $70.35, which is about $5 a month increase each year of the implementation. The excessive user would see an increase of $103.08 to $126.68, and you can see that minimum user would go from $40.75 to $48.45. And here's option 2. Once again, looking at the average user, it's going up to about $72, so it's about $5 a month, like the previous option. But the main difference is that the higher users will see higher charges and the lower users will see lower charges. So here's just a little discussion of this option. Under option 1, that's the water enterprise would collect about 70% of revenue from meter versus volumetric, which is consistent with the current rate structure. And a pro to that is it provides high revenue stability, but a con is that users will pay a majority of their bills on a fixed monthly basis, so there's less incentive to conserve. Under option 2, they would collect about 50% from meter versus volumetric, and the pro would be that it sends a stronger conservation signal and lowers bills for low users. But the con is that it increases revenue volatility. So a drought could cause a greater loss of revenue. So here's a regional rate survey for water. And this is your typical single-family residential user. The survey average for the region was $84.24 per month, which is the yellow dotted line. And Angels Camp is around $42 a month. And on this graph, you can see the blue is the fixed charge and the gray is the volumetric charge for usage. So option 1 and 2 are in the green. So it's a slight increase on the survey. But you're still kind of well below the average for the region. So here's a comparison with your neighbor CCWD. And the reason I include this slide is because the larger meters appear to be going up quite significantly. So I want to kind of compare those larger meters with CCWD to show a comparison. So if you look at the 2-inch, it's currently $121.09 per month. And under option 1, it would go to $290, option 2, $216. CCWD's is about $450 a month for that 2-inch. And our proposed meter charges are based on the industry standard AWWA ratios. So we're actually using very similar ratios to what CCWD is using. So even under our proposed options, the meter charges look very favorable compared to CCWD. So now, any questions or comments on the water presentation?
I had a question. I was wondering, what is the ones that have the larger pipes and have the greatest increase, what kind of businesses would that take, for the meter size, I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So I think for a 2-inch meter, that would be more kind of like a fast food restaurant.
Okay.
And then I think you only have one 6-inch meter, which is the mobile home park.
Oh, okay. But they're going to have a reduction in the unit?
Right, so we're proposing to eliminate that per unit charge, so
Right.
overall, the mobile home park will see actually a reduction
Okay,
in their
so
bill.
they're the 6-inch. What about 3-4? Do we have that? Is it in the city?
Right, I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Oh,
So, city staff does have the list of all the customers that are on various meter size. We didn't choose to make that public information at this point, but we do have all of the ratepayers' information by meter size, and so that's
Yeah.
the way it's classified within our accounting system. So if that's information that you are interested in, we could go over that, but I believe anything above the standard 5/8 will most substantially affect our commercial business community, and probably multifamily residences.
So we do have, there are other businesses with the 3 and 4. I just was curious to know, which businesses would, how it would be affected, like the mobile home. Now, I know the unit that saves. Anyway, just because it's a big jump.
So, and I think too, there's a section in the tables where Michael provides the meter size and the number of customers within
that would be good.
that meter size. So that's within the tables, table 4. So that shows you how many customers will be impacted within those sizes. The majority in customers over 1,800 are within the 5/8 meter size.
Yes.
And I think one of the recommendations that we would hope as staff is that there's direction from the council to engage the business community in a discussion about how these increases will impact them.
A question for you, Michael, and maybe Michael Minkler would provide a little input to it, but on the rate pass-through piece with respect to water costs coming through the system at UWPA, that pass-through would be applicable to rates for water only, and wouldn't have any, the effect of the cost of operations there don't come into play. It's just simply what the water costs coming into the system. Is that?
Right, that's
is that
correct.
the way I understand that?
Yep.
Okay. And how volatile is that, Michael?
Well, I think, and that's why they're calling it a wholesale water pass-through, because a lot of retail agencies rely on a wholesaler, which is essentially what UWPA is. And so a pass-through can allow the retail agency to account for changes in the wholesale rate, which the retail agency doesn't control necessarily, without having to go back through the whole Prop 218 process.
The part that I'm a little confused on is that we make a contribution, we don't actually get a bill from UWPA, we just make a contribution.
Right.
So with respect to any rate relief that we get, is strictly dependent on what UWPA is paying for the upstream water coming into the system?
No, it's not necessarily tied directly, it's not tied to any purchase of water necessarily, it's just, that's the cost of the water delivery, basically. And we offset that cost to the extent we can, but your contribution is going towards the cost of getting the water to Angels Camp.
Which is intermingled with the cost of electrical generation and sale of water and all of the things that go into the operation of the entire JPA, right?
Yeah, offset by the cost of, by the electricity generation, and then all the other costs, right, our UWPA costs are just gonna be included in whatever that contribution is.
So so the shortfall in the contribution, is that considered an upstream rate cost to the city? If we had to go from 125 to some higher number?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. If it's an upstream.
As I understand it, the only output from the city for what we get with respect to the water is our contribution today of $125,000. Is that true?
That's what's in the draft rate study, is just a fixed contribution of 125 with, it looks like an annual escalator.
Well, that's what, we paid more in the past, we paid nothing in the past.
Right.
But we pay it $125 now, and it looks like that yields a shortfall with respect to the operations in UWPA.
Right.
Well, there's a shortfall there, and the 125 doesn't overcome it.
Right.
So my question is, if it becomes 250, our contribution, Michael, is that a rate pass-through? Or is that just an operating budget problem for the city?
Right, our view is it's the wholesale costs that are increasing, so you would then pass those additional costs on to the ratepayers.
And in this kind of a rate study, would that be the baseline, the 125,000?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Right, so any additional contribution above that would be considered that wholesale pass-through that you could pass to ratepayers.
Okay.
I think if you structure it that way, the question for the council just becomes, where do you want that initial level to be set at, knowing that it's not enough, even in our wettest water year, to cover our projected budget deficit.
Right.
But it is, I'm assuming, based on this year's, which is, so this year, the city's contribution is 85,000. That doesn't, that's in addition to the $40,000 annual water contract that we have in place with both of our member agencies. So we don't consider that an additional contribution. We just consider that, that's a fixed annual payment for that, under that contract. And then for anything above and beyond that is what we tend to refer to as a contribution, but it is a wholesale pass-through. And that's what
reality is the 125 is our contribution to get the water.
Right. That's the combined total of the 40,000 and the 85,000 that you're paying this year.
Okay.
But that is only enough this year because we're drawing substantially on Utica reserves to make up for the rest of this year's budget deficit. Mm-hmm. Going forward, if you want to zero the budget so that we're not drawing from those reserves every year, the contribution would have to basically, it would have to be significantly higher.
Well,
if not double.
I see Melissa taking notes over there, so that whole issue needs to be intertwined into this rate study, and have a lot of clarity to it, I think.
Right.
So that it's ready, it's identifiable and justified as part of the rate pass-through issue.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, and I think then I would just, if we could take a look at your UWPA contribution slide and then the proposed recommendation. So if the idea is we need to double that contribution to 250 and then also anticipate this pass-through provision, then that would, I can assume, double those rates.
Right, it would double the fee.
Double this fee. So then,
alternatively, you could take at face value what Michael's saying about it's understood that it's a deficit issue there already, and so the baseline may not be 125, it may be something more.
okay.
Going in.
What had the member agency, for educational purposes, what is the member agency, UPUD, what have they done
Yeah, that's a good-
to balance the situation we're talking about now?
It's a good way to demonstrate an alternative, I suppose, is because UPUD just did their, they just went through their Prop 218 process to increase the UWPA portion of their bill 2 years ago, I think it was, last year. And what they decided to do was basically a sliding scale that can fluctuate from year to year depending on whether depending on which water year we're in and whether we've been able to get the better contract that we need. So they have, the UPUD board has actually quite a bit of discretion from year to year as to what the UWPA fee is going to be. And I won't get the numbers exactly right, but if I remember correctly, when they first implemented that rate increase, it was in our, the water year 6 that we had, and so their UWPA fee went from $1 a month per customer to, I think, $12 a month per customer. But then since then, because we've had better water years, it's gone back down. I think maybe it's in the $6 or $7 per customer range now. But they have So there's pros and cons to doing it that way, right? The disadvantage is it can be confusing, and your ratepayers may not like not knowing what their rate's going to be from year to year. The upside of it is the agency is protected even in the worst case scenarios, which are, we don't get the better contract that we need, and we get hit with multiple water year sixes in a row where we're running, $1 million budget deficits at UWPA, and the reserves are gone. Those are the scenarios that should be keeping us up at night. And the advantage of doing the sliding scale is the agency is then protected from that scenario, even though it's going to be a big hit on the ratepayers. Doing it with a fixed fee, you have the wholesale pass-through. So the agency, I guess, is still protected in that sense. It's just a less defined way to do it. But and then I guess the downside, the other side of that equation is, the best case scenario is we do get a better contract, and we are going to have maybe some years where there's a budget surplus, and the city doesn't need to, to take that 125 necessarily, unless you're just saving it for a rainy day for the next dry year, which will come. So there's different ways to do it. UPUD did it in a way, like I said, that is different than what's proposed here. You could leave it at 125 where it is now, and you just assume that you're going to have a pass-through pretty much every year until we can change the revenue situation at UWPA, or you increase that baseline in hopes that there'll be some years where you don't need to implement that.
And so if I understand with the pass-through, we notice and we provide an explanation of the pass-through. We give 30-day notice when we have to implement a pass-through, but it doesn't require ratepayer approval or a
Right.
secondary public hearing.
Right.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that everybody understands that is, we have the capacity for that sliding scale, should those costs be realized, without having to go back to the public with a request to increase the rate.
My only concern will be that if we go with that concept, that the likelihood for legal challenge from somebody is going to go a lot higher. Because somebody will challenge whether or not that's a legitimate, wholesale pass-through, and whether or not it should have been adopted differently, particularly when you're going into a known deficit type situation. So that would be my only concern.
So are we?
What recommendations, other than the pass-through, or what else is out there existing too?
Well, Melissa and I were just whispering about this,
Yeah.
but I probably would increase the rate to something that you think is actually flex cost. And then I would create a reserve fund and create stabilization based off of the reserve fund.
A reserve fund we hold until they
Correct.
need it and ask
So
for it.
So that your reserve fund, is large enough to where it stabilizes the fluctuations, as opposed to, basically somebody each year getting fairly significant changes. I mean, the negative to the other aspects is you get really, really wild fluctuations every year, and that can be very unsettling for folks who are on fixed incomes or want to do multi-year budget plans. So if you get too much money, it's easier to get it back than it is to get it authorized.
Given the past couple years of how we've had to allocate funding to UPA, it gives council a better study, because we're constantly going back and forth and not always knowing what the projections are out of what our contributions are. We talk about it, but then we come back and it just will relieve some of that anxiety, I guess would be the word, of always, okay, what is this year going to look like? And at least if we have some kind of a steady projection out, maybe that'll bring some of that anxiety down, and not be so all over the place, I guess, too. But
So are we trying, go ahead.
I'm going to switch gears,
Okay.
so if you want.
Well, I was just thinking, are we talking about then doing a set contribution or having our staff have, come to a place where this is the amount, this is the contribution that they made, or, anyway, that's the question.
So I think that this is exactly part of the policy discussion that Michael was hoping to have with you. So he has sort of the policy options sheet that I put somewhere in a really safe place in my stack of information, where he highlighted the pros and cons of option 1 and 2. And then I think the other policy discussion is the handling of the UWPA fee.
Yes.
So, we've got information on how the council direction would like to start shaping the discussion on the UWPA fee. Michael, do you have any other questions about the direction that they've given in terms of creating a process for a sliding scale for that fee?
I think that makes sense. Increasing it, it sounds like we're actually projecting larger deficits, so having maybe doubling the cost sounds like a reasonable approach.
Okay, and then do you have enough information to develop the sliding scale?
I believe I do.
So dependent on the variables, like the water year and any other things that can impact the deficit that UWPA has, that will have the capacity to respond to those without utilizing that sort of pass-through theory. Is that what, did I understand correctly, what you'd like us to do?
Whatever legal
Can I-
things will
can I-
get
can I
us
say- so-
not in the,
The one, so I don't think we can just double the rates and have that be the justification, but we could use like a 5-year average of what we've been charged WPA. I mean, that should hit some good years and some bad years, correct?
You could also do,
With an escalator, of course, but.
right, the two things that come to mind to me that might be prudent are, one, just basing it on your minimum being what we think our budget projection is going to be based on our existing contracts in a water year 1, which is, I think, roughly 500,000 combined, so 250 for the city. And then you would have an escalator for each of the different water years based on that table I showed you, plus interest. That's one possible way to do it. Or you could set it at, I think the peak contribution from the city was 270 a couple of years ago, and I think there were 2 years in a row where that was the contribution. So you could set your base at that level. The one thing to keep in mind is, if you end up collecting more revenue than the UWPA contribution that year is, once you go through this process, that money is still earmarked for UWPA. So then if you end up so then it's in a reserve account. If you end up in a water year 6, instead of getting hit with, a $500,000 contribution, you've got a reserve hopefully built up so that your wholesale pass-through ends up being less than it otherwise would have been, because you have that reserve.
So that'd be my only concern, is making sure that everything is based off of real, true metrics, and it's
Right.
not just.
Yeah,
That
it
sounds
get a
good.
5-year average,
Yeah.
Yeah,
including
5 years.
2.9% for inflation or whatever, and then, yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
I think I would
So
have
Michael,
one
do
more
you
question.
also recommend the wholesale pass-through?
So I guess that's where I'm a little confused as to the and this is not for direction for me, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure where the council is on that in terms of, is it the wholesale pass-through, or is it that you actually want a sliding scale that's more defined?
I think we're talking about having something
Yeah.
that's more defined, with the ability
Right.
to
Not pass.
to slide while creating stability. So in other words, if it slides down, you're not paying money that you don't need to pay, and it can go into a reserve account for the
Right.
day in which,
Right.
the larger bill kind of comes in. So-
Okay.
so
And then the
if-
other question there is if you wanted to do something like what UPUD did with, on the rosy scenario side of, if we're able to increase revenue, do you want to have the ability to lower that actually below where it otherwise would have been? But again, any surplus would just go into a UWPA reserve, and you're only looking out 5 years here, so you would have the opportunity then to revisit that.
Well, and once you hit a certain reserve cap that you feel comfortable about, now that can either go through a rate reduction, or, you can eliminate.
Yeah,
some of this
build that
fees
in,
on those.
that makes sense.
So, just to double check to make sure that I'm understanding the numbers, so it would basically go potentially to 250 was the baseline. up to maybe 500,000 was the deficit in the,
Well, 270 for the city, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Or half.
our half.
Our
Yeah.
half.
270, but in the worst water year 6, his deficit, I believe, was over $1 million.
Let me pull that up.
So that would be 500,000 for the city.
So we got to take an average of that.
So then what?
That's
So right-
Divided
average,
by-
so when you get that bad year, you've got a reserve. fund.
Right.
In the good years, you got the surplus.
So right now, and I can provide this to you, it's just, the numbers are slightly different. I gave you a similar table, Melissa,
Yeah.
a month or so ago, and the numbers have changed a little bit, not a whole lot since then, but right now, the water year 1 deficit with the current power purchase agreements that we have, the deficit would be 550,124. And then all the way, gradually up to water year 6, 1,320,026.
Okay, so the 550 divided by 2, that's where we get our 225. So theoretically.
275.
275, I'm sorry. So then theoretically, all of those meter size rates then would go up by that proportional amount, because we've identified 125 here. So I just want the council to be aware, when we go to the public with this is what will happen with your water bill, when we get to that sliding scale year 6, and we hit them with half of the 1.3 million as their UWPA charge, that's going to become a substantial amount based on the meter size and the projections we have here.
But we're not saying sliding scale, though. Are we? No, we're not saying sliding scale, we're saying, so we wouldn't, if we did.
You create stability.
Yeah, just the stability over the 5 years. Maybe I'm misunderstanding you.
Okay,
But
and
you were saying
but
sliding
we're
scale.
recommending, so what Doug's saying is an average
Yeah.
of that
Right.
range, but still anywhere, but just be
Just-
conscious of
yeah.
these rates,
Okay.
what that average amount will do to those rates, and so that's just my.
I think what Melissa's saying is in order to get basically a rainy day fund and have rate stabilization with where you're at, you effectively are going to have to double the rates
Probably at
that
least, yeah.
are close to doubling, or at least close to there, in order to be able to do that. So it may be, now those doublings would happen in the short term with the hope that you've created a reserve fund, so when you have those peak years, you're not having to come up with, an extra $250,000 of contribution.
So when we say doubling the rate, what is the rate we're saying when we double it?
So if you look at the UWPA.
Right, so it's that $3.89 for the 5/8 inch, which is typical single-family.
So,
389.
but understand that that's not a real rate even now, because we know that there's a structural deficit, or there's a deficit on all but basically a perfect year. So that 389 is a number that never would ever be realized. Meaning that somebody would always have to, most likely always have to pay more.
I mean, like if we took the water year 3, since that's the middle, that
It'd be
would probably be.
I
our
think
rate.
you need to present that in exactly that way, though, that pay me now or pay me later. There's an alternative that speaks to doubling it now, which creates a reserve.
Correct.
As
And
opposed
you get
to
rate
whatever the
stabilization
other
and
choices
predictability.
are.
Yeah,
I think the public presentations have to include Michael's presentation. I mean, people need to hear where the water comes from, how it gets here, everything that Kyle and his crew does to keep it running.
Well, we need the water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and the fact that we are looking at alternative water sources. So, I mean, it needs to be a complete story.
The only other thing I'd mention in terms of, if you don't have any sort of ability to increase, you don't have a sliding scale, you don't have the wholesale pass-through, if you're just trying to do a rate stabilization fund where you're hopefully having a surplus in some years and saving for other years, obviously the short term you mentioned is the risk, right? So if in the next year or two, we have dry years, and you haven't had an opportunity to build up that reserve yet, then you're going back to tapping the enterprise fund or wherever those sources of funds that you used before. That's the only other risk I would point out there.
But in that situation, we would have had to do that.
Dude,
Yeah,
anyways,
we'd be
right, we
going
would
back
have-
to the ratepayer.
Sure, and you'd have at least part of it covered by your increased UWPA fee.
Correct.
But it wouldn't be enough it may not be enough to cover the whole contribution. So that's just something to be aware of in the short term.
You still have your question?
I do. So on the graph for option 1 and option 2, it looks like basically, and I'll use the average line in there. It basically goes from 45 to 70. So basically $5 each year for the next 5 years.
Right, yes.
Now, does that include the UWPA? Did that include that, what was it, $3.89 to start with?
Yep, it includes the UWPA charge.
It does, okay. So we're basically for water, for the average of everyday Joe Blows out there, and I mean, it's basically $5 every year for the next 5 years increase.
$5
Right.
Or $5 a month, right. $5 a month yearly for the next 5 years. And then after that, do we have something set up for inflation and growth? Like a 3% increase every year rather than 8%, so we don't fall back?
We have to come back.
We have to come back to that. Okay.
So I was wondering, do we want to look at option 1 and 2 now to see if we have a preference?
Well, I think we've had a
Do we
little
want to
discussions
like-
in order.
Sure,
you know.
absolutely.
Before we do that, I know there are a couple council members that may need to use the restroom before we dive. I don't know if there's anybody else, but can we take like a 2-minute break? Is that okay? Okay. Is everyone okay with that?
If more people
Okay.
use the restroom.
And then we'll be able to go into public comment questions and then bring that back through this discussion. Is that, okay, let's do that.
2 minutes is a lot of pressure.
Okay, so we were going to discuss options, correct? So before we go back into discussion options, is this the appropriate time to get feedback from public comment before we?
Good.
And then that way we can take that into consideration of our discussion at the council?
How much more do you have of your presentation?
Right, we also have wastewater to cover.
Yeah, but I
Just getting
want to
started.
get started with what, I kind of think it's important to separate it while if that's
We can
okay?
bifurcate it.
Okay.
So I would let people know that we're going to only be taking public comments on the water portion during that, and then we'll reopen it again for waste.
Okay. Okay. So, you do that, it's open, and then,
Open it just for water.
okay. So, at this time, it'll just be water questions or comments from the public, if anyone wishes to comment now on that portion. And then we will wait till we do the wastewater presentation to focus on those questions. Go ahead.
I commend you for asking for these kinds of presentations and discussions. It's very, very healthy and important. I do have a comment, and right along what you're talking about, I think it's so important to have focus on the water projects in terms of agreeing as a council, what are we going to spend the money on, and then on water, and then, okay, now what does that mean? Having a whole thing of water and wastewater simultaneously is kind of overwhelming, to say the least. So I think that my only comment, suggestion, would be to agree on the water projects, so important, because as you see in the schedules we're looking at, is the assumption is the city will be making capital improvements of $1 million per year for at least the next 10 years. And that's a lot of money, and you have to agree that that's what the plan is in advance. There's a couple of items that bothered me on the proposed budget. All of a sudden, we see a line item, professional services, running at $140,000 to $190,000 per year. And so I'd like to ask a question. What is that for? What professional services would the water fund be needing? And this is above what's being, as shows in your current budget. The other thing is that I think the public needs to be aware that there is a reserve in the water fund of $6.5 million. That's prudent, and it's been at that level for quite a period of time. So although this money's been spent, there is still a very substantial reserve of $6.5 million in the water fund. So again, have a separate discussion of water projects, approve those, and then go into the water fund. That's my suggestion anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Is there any other public comments or questions for water? No? Okay, with that, I'm gonna bring it back to council. If there's any other further comments, questions regarding this section before we move on to wastewater.
Are we going to have a little discussion around option 1, option 2? I'll just jump right out there and say, initially, the option 1 has less volatility from a revenue point of view, and given the way we have to spread the cost over that, in an era where we get forced to tell people to conserve, either by mandate or in reality, that puts incredible pressure on the budget to lose that revenue on the variable side. So with that in mind, I tend to lean towards option 1. That's my thinking on it at the moment.
I also like option 1 from the city side of it, as 70% we know it's coming in every month. As the water payer, I kind of like the 50%. Because I can do a little bit, something about it, but for the city side of it, I think option 1, knowing where 70% of it's coming from is a good thing.
And I'm in agreement with that as well.
I agree also, option 1.
So how do we,
I think
do we do a motion or consensus, or do we just?
This is just
Okay.
feedback for him to bring back.
Okay.
So he can kind of make sure we're going down the right road.
Okay.
And so what I would like to do is we can bring back these updated tables in February based on the direction on the UWPA fee, utilizing option 1. And then my hope is that I get further direction at the end of the presentation on public outreach. And then at that February meeting, we would begin the public outreach with those options and still bring it back to you for giving you the community input on those meetings, and then get the recommendation for the rates at that point in time. So I still think more time for your approval of the rates and the options.
Okay. So is everyone comfortable with that before? Okay.
Amanda, do you
yes.
mind if I make one more
No,
comment?
go ahead.
Jack pointed out something to me at the break that I think I should remember to mention every time I give a presentation on UWPA. And it kind of goes along the lines of your question of what is this based on? And my response was that, we don't have a full capital improvement plan built into this. This is just based on what we, what we think our revenue projections, based on our last couple of years of expenditures, and that we think it's going to at least be that much going forward. One critical piece, though, that we can't forget about is the relicensing of our 2 FERC licenses. And the UWPA board established a reserve fund for that a couple of years ago. Even though we're running budget deficits, it's hard to establish reserves in the financial situation that we have right now. But that's an expense that will probably be, it could, anywhere from $3 to $5 million.
Per FERC
Maybe
license
less,
or
maybe
total?
more for both licenses.
Angels and?
No, yeah, combined. And our current rate of, building that reserve, we're going to have to start spending that money, probably within the next 3 to 5 years. The licenses aren't due, they don't expire until 2033, but it's a 10-year process. And it's an expensive process, and the current rate of savings for that right now is not enough to keep up with where we're going to need to be. So I think what you have